Welcome to X Connect the show. My name is Kareem Kanji. We have lovely guest Corina Newby from right now from Supernova. Things
That's
are
correct.
changing, and we
Yep.
can talk about that. But we need to thank some people and promote some people as well. Obviously, for those of you watching, you might know, and if you don't, thank you for finding us. X Connect the show is a project of Third Ocean, and you can find us on xconnectto.com as well as on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/xconnecttv. We are a proud sponsor of Define TO, which is being put together. Have you heard about this?
Heard it. Rumor mill's kind of spinning, yeah.
It's going around. Put together by the people that have been putting on the Twestival events in Toronto for the past couple of years. So go check them out at defineto.com. It's going to be a fundraiser on April the 12th in support of the very good people at the Remix Project. So go check them out as well. And special thanks to Hearth TV, the producers of such fantastic shows as The Sean Ward Show, as well as the people behind Toronto Batman for their studio space here, as well as thanks to Big Time Design and Communication for all the design work and support, as well as to Third Ocean, our social media and community management agency. Love to announce, just recently happened, you've been following us on Twitter, we have a new syndication partner. Go and check them out at itbusiness.ca. And a special thank you, of course, to Shaoling Chung, who's on the other side of the camera. And I think I've taken like 15 minutes now thanking everybody. But let's chat, Corina. Thanks so much for popping by.
Thanks for having me. It's
really
good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming in. Now, if somebody were to take a look at your website or LinkedIn, you're like involved in like 1,001.
Yeah, I'm a busy person. I wear a lot of hats, that's for sure.
Now, one of the more recent things that you've been doing is with this, I guess, website, community website, fashion, trend, Biff Bam Pop.
Yeah, Biff Bam Pop is kind of a passion project, we'll call it. It's very much, unsolicited by anyone, anywhere. There's no sponsorship. There's no money behind it. But myself and a few other people in the community are really passionate about comics. Cartoons is kind of my thing. Film, any kind of that sort of edgy genre, definitely pop culture, but not sort of mainstream pop culture. What we might call geek culture, I guess, is a fair way to put it. And we have very few rules about what goes onto the site, but everyone who writes for the site is in some way either tied to what they're writing about. So they may work in the comics industry, they may actually be an illustrator or a writer, or they may work in the film industry, or they're an extreme fan. And in my case, I write about South Park, actually, is my specialty for the blog. So that's how I got involved. I was writing...
You're a writer for South Park, sorry?
No, I wish. Oh my goodness.
You're an extreme fan.
I'm an extreme fan. I would love to be a writer, so, if anyone's watching, give me a call. But by all means, it was a passion project more than anything else. We didn't even intend for it to become a very popular blog, but I think when you have passionate people writing about things that other people are extremely passionate about, community grows out of that very organically. So it's been a fun project. We get to sort of test a lot of things that I would not normally get to do in a corporate culture. There's a lot of risk that we can take. We don't have a huge following as of yet, so we're not too worried about making anyone angry or pissing people off. But the fun thing about the blog is that we do have a lot of support from some of the more corporate-minded people in the industry. So we have, a lot of book publishers who are now taking notice, asking us to review their stuff, asking us to talk to their authors. A couple film people have been working with us as well. Locally, we've got people like, the Pinball Cafe, Silver Snail, all of the genre authorities, the trust agents of geek culture in Toronto, is really who we want to involve in the site. And whether they want to write for it or just be heard somehow on the site. That's really where Biff Bam Pop is all about. And my role there, aside from writing, is as a social editor. So I'm trying to slowly build their social presence. We're not focused on numbers as much as engagement. So like any blog, even though we don't have advertising revenue right now, that's kind of one thing that we're looking to down the road. So the more traffic we can get, the better. Our community numbers are not as strong yet, but that's one of the things that I'm going to be working on with Biff Bam Pop.
You guys just started, didn't you?
We did. They launched in a very informal way back in 2008, but the blog in its current iterations really since August. And we've been coming close to about a 25% traffic increase every month since then. And given that it's all volunteer staff and none of us are 100% dedicated to it, we're really happy with the numbers.
Nice.
And they've got some other things on the go. They're doing an anthology collection, so they have some publishing interests as well, not just digital publishing, but actually real print publishing down the road. They did a comics collection last year with some of their friends. So, these are people who know how to take their passion and turn it into stuff. The team's fantastic. The editor, Andrew Burns, he's done a lot of copywriting in the city. He used to write for Explore Music. He's, a legit writer. But again, this comes purely out of his passion for comic books.
Fantastic.
And it's really fun. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Good. Now, your full-time gig at present is in charge of, what's the official title? I know you as the social girl.
Yeah, exactly.
At Supernova.
All things social. My official title is communications officer, which is a very rigid corporate way of putting social activity into their framework. But, roles like community manager, engagement manager, social media writer, like all of those things would really fit under that hat. They're just very new roles, and in a relatively small company like Supernova, one person wears all those hats.
Absolutely.
So communications is what I do there. But certainly anything that is customer facing in terms of the bands that we speak with, I'm writing that, whether it's reviews or concert updates or calls to action. And then of course we have a huge community of fans that's tied into the site as well, and they're the ones who are really those are the ones who are really engaging with our band, so we're trying to reward them more almost than the artists on our site. We want the fans to make the bands feel important, so my role is kind of to make sure that tons of fans are constantly coming into that funnel and making our bands feel like they're really being heard and I guess growing their own fan base.
For those who are watching and might have just heard of Supernova for the first time right now, why don't you explain to everyone, what is supernova.com?
Great, good question. Supernova's been around for about 20 years, so it's definitely changed faces a couple of different times. Same original co-founders. They began by running Battle of the Bands in Canada, and if there's been a Battle of the Bands that's sort of a higher than local level somewhere in Canada, they've probably been involved in it. A lot of the bands that I used to come and see in high school, unknowingly, were actually playing Supernova shows. So when I got involved in the company, it was like,
I know this.
I remember this. And you guys might have heard of a little movie called Scott Pilgrim versus the World. The creator played our shows and was inspired by that and wrote this hilarious, edgy Toronto comedy. And our club Rocket was featured in that film. So, there's a lot of Supernova, I guess, heritage that comes into Toronto that maybe isn't bragged about enough.
Sure.
But, having done that, they worked with hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of bands. People who've played the stage and kind of moved on from Supernova include like Billy Talent, 3 Days Grace, Sum 41 was discovered directly off our stage. So there's a lot of claims to fame. More recently, Down with Webster. There's a lot of bands who've come through Supernova at some point. And they just want to give independent bands a chance to play big stages. So no matter how big you are, how many fans you have, if you can get a few people out to see your show, you can take over the Sound Academy for that set and really blow it up. So that's where Supernova began. They grew into an interactive agency basically because they have some really talented software developers on their staff. Okay. A long time ago, Supernova decided that they were going to jump into the social media fray. Basically, around 2004, 2005, Facebook was just kind of coming into the mainstream vocabulary. And Supernova had a proprietary social network just designed to help organize their bands and fans. So help bands book and find gigs, help fans to support those bands and make sure that they can request those gigs. And that social network today has become supernova.com. Long story short, that software, of course, is really valuable. Bands are using it as a DIY promotional tool. It's tied into Facebook and Twitter now, so it's not a separate social network. It's all intertwined. That's kind of the trend. And now other people have taken notice of that software and would like to use it for their own purposes. So Supernova...
In the music industry?
Primarily in the music industry, yes. It's just the most applicable vertical right now.
Sure.
But there's lots of different places that we could certainly take the software. Chorus Radio was the first person to really step up and look at how they might be able to use the software for their own purposes.
Yeah, you have a lot of, I remember when you spoke a while back, last year sometime probably, you have a lot of partnerships, or Supernova has a lot of partnerships with a lot of radio stations.
Definitely. So the Chorus sort of family engulfs most of the major radio stations in Canada that we're probably familiar with just from an alternative indie standpoint. So the Edge in Toronto, they have Power 97 out in Winnipeg, they have a huge station called CFox out in Vancouver. And most of these stations have a strong connection to the local indie scene. Some of these stations had an existing opportunity for the bands to somehow get heard on the radio or get exposed on the radio, get discovered through the station. And that local connection drives a lot of audience loyalty in their market.
Sure.
But where the radio stations have been having trouble or have had trouble keeping up is with the technology angle and just the scalability of something like a talent contest when you're talking about, maybe 5 or 10 bands submitting entries on a CD versus thousands of bands submitting MP3s through some digital channel. So Supernova's definitely stepped in to work with Chorus and bring some of those existing contests kind of into the modern social age, and then to really maximize what the stations were already doing with their listener clubs by tying them into things like Facebook. Twitter's coming soon. We all know that a social network doesn't really thrive when it's segregated. It has to be tied into, what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
So what Supernova's done is enable some of their existing software to work better with the social applications that are out there.
Okay.
And of course, in doing so, we all know that you can collect a lot of data from the users. There's, listener metrics, so it could be to help the stations target their broadcasts or their programming. Sponsorship revenues, of course, come into play. And, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to connect with the community in real life, like in personal, either outreach or concerts or giveaways, whatever that may be, but to use social as a way to actually, bring more people into the discussion and, of course, eventually expand your audience reach. Ratings are the name of the game, so what Supernova's done very well is identify what the key objectives are for radio, which, yes, we want more Facebook fans, yes, we want more Twitter followers, but really we want ratings and we need listeners. Yeah. And the bottom line is not really moving that much for most industries. So social needs to find a way to drive those bottom line revenues. And that's what Supernova is doing right now. The nice thing about it is because our background's in music, we're not really that marketing focused. We're very much entertainment and engagement focused. But if you tie your engagement efforts, again, to those key measurables, then you start to see how social can kind of be fun for a company, but also pay off.
Sure.
The ROI becomes less of an argument, I think.
It becomes apparent.
Exactly. Apparent and something that they can, measure and put their finger on next year and use to tweak and hone their future campaigns. Social is very fun, there's no doubt about it, but what a lot of companies struggle with initially is how to make that fun profitable and how to make sure that they were somehow assigning a value to it. So, that a lot of the metrics and things like that come into play with social software is what Supernova is actually providing on the back end. Front end wise, someone like myself is really just helping them brainstorm how to use their internal resources wisely. So, software and whatever they may have, but also personnel. A lot of stations have interns that can create content like you wouldn't believe,
sure,
but they may not be purposing that content properly. So a lot of the social channels that they're trying to attack right now may not, again, be driving their bottom line. Our software helps them to refocus that messaging and then, of course, to measure it afterwards. And we're working with Chorus right now to do that. We've got about 5 or 6 different station platforms launched. I mentioned in the spring, we were talking earlier, they're launching all their new talent search contests, so keep your eyes open for those. That would be River City Rocks, Power 97, and CFox Vancouver Seeds, which is like 35 years running now. These are well-established contests, so it's cool to be part. The other thing that we've done this year more recently is work with Astral on the Radio Star contest, which I don't know if you've heard, but it incorporated a lot of the Virgin stations across Canada. And, very similar, like let's source independent talent. Who cares if they've ever, had a concert performance? Who cares how many fans they have? It doesn't matter. All you do is you submit a song based on the merit of that song and fan voting and judging and a few other factors. We'll give these bands a chance to become an actual radio star.
Yeah.
And that's tied into CMW this year as well. So Canadian Music Week is actually going to feature some of those artists.
Fantastic.
Give them a spot on the stage. These are legitimate opportunities for bands. So again, in one sense, it's fun and exciting, and we're creating sort of new things in the music industry where people can actually dig their teeth in. But in another sense, for the corporate level, we're actually making sure that this drives revenues. And you have to strike a balance with all social software that way.
True.
Yeah.
So you brought up a few things. One about driving revenues, and it seems to be a constant conversation these days, especially in the music industry.
Definitely.
On how everyone from the music producers, like the writers and the bands themselves, all the way up to the record producers and the labels. How are they able to realize further profits with everything that's going on in digital and technology? You mentioned Canadian Music Week coming up, and at the present time that we're taping this, we've got South by Southwest happening in Austin. So there's conversations that are taking place and will take place this month about music and technology and how music should adapt or can adapt or needs to take advantage of various digital and technology tools. What are some of the simple things that should be done in your opinion? Let's say on the distribution side when it comes to music.
Well, I think the icing on the cake for everyone is the whole licensing question, and how do we deal with the border issue and music distribution. That's really the biggest challenge from an industry standpoint right now. I think it's a global economy. There really are no borders online. We all know that, and anytime they try to enforce those borders through your different accessibility rights, it's certainly not making the users happy, which is supposed to be the end goal.
Sure.
And it's not really helping the artists. It's decreasing their visibility, and it's limiting their exposure. So I think that's one thing that's going to have to be dealt with. I don't think it necessarily means opening up all borders, everywhere, but it has to be addressed. There's no question.
Who does it protect when we have these border issues? Like when we, Canada, can't legally access Spotify, who does that protect here in Canada?
I mean, personally, I'm not sure that it protects anyone. I think that part of it is that if you're going to have an industry that ties, again, some kind of dollar value to media consumption, that consumption has to be measurable, and it has to be very clearly measurable. And anytime you start to leap over borders, you get into all sorts of IP tracking issues, different, obviously, content accessibility issues just through different players, and I'm not really sure that people are setting up these laws necessarily to protect anyone at this point. I think that's obviously the guise of licensing in general, and it performs that function. But I think that these limitations now have more to do with our sort of inability to keep up maybe with the spread of technology. I really believe that people in the industry, the mainstream industry, did not necessarily foresee the bleed of music on an international level. Certainly not the popularity of music sort of almost as a kitsch factor in other countries. I can't tell you how many bands from Toronto have gotten big in Germany or somewhere else where we have probably never understood that they even had a fan base there, but that band is trying to tap something about their image that, I don't know, it could be that they're really Canadian, or it could be that it's just something different, but it becomes very difficult if you're forced to tap into the same market over and over again. Markets become oversaturated. In Canada, we have tons of laws to protect our artists' interests right now. We all know that Canadian content laws are rather extreme, and I agree with them, but you don't want those laws to force you to operate only within your country. That's not the point. The point is simply that your fan base starts here and can grow outwards. So I definitely think that, in terms of who we're really protecting and who we're most concerned with, right now the concern lies with being able to track and measure and monitor, who's paying fees, who should be paying fees, and, ultimately who should have access to that music. What I'd like to see happen is for companies like Spotify to assume some of that responsibility. Last.fm was kind of moving in that direction. There's plenty of services, even iTunes to some degree with their new cloud service, should be large enough to force the labels or whoever it is that's got the rights to this music to kind of agree to something. It's in everyone's best interest. So is it going to be easy? No. Is it going to happen quickly? No. But I really don't foresee a future where everyone is blocked from listening to music unless they have a certain licensing system set up. There has to be something more open. I don't personally have the solution, and that's part of the problem. I think when you talk about South by and some of these conferences, a lot of people are talking about it jumping the shark, and some of it is maybe oversaturated with marketing. But the people in the industry who are trying to come up with these solutions need to get together and need to see what each other are doing, need to hear each other brag about what they're doing, need to think about how they can improve upon it, because there exists some really fundamental problems with the way that the old industry worked and the way that the new industry is going to have to work, and they're going to have to come to an agreement at some point.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond licensing, it's it's something that independent artists are kind of trying to take back as well. And I work with a lot of independent artists. Most of the artists I work with are not on any label. And one of the reasons why they've chosen to go that route is, A, it's easier nowadays. So, there's plenty of tools out there and people out there to help you. But B, you don't have to worry about licensing so much anymore. It's not as much of a concern to them. They don't really care if their song is being picked up and played elsewhere. They see it as a benefit to them. And most artists nowadays are more realistic in their expectations. They may put out a single not so much to make $1 million, but to get their name out there so that when they're ready to put out their next EP, they can maybe make some money on it. I do feel like, artists are maybe more aware of these difficulties. I mean, they're faced with them every single day. And listeners are not quite sure what's going on in the industry. They don't know why they can't access music. So listeners are attracted to the independent artists on that note. You don't have to pay for it as much. It's usually easier to get a download for it. And I want my music in that kind of easy to digest format. If labels are going to make it difficult for me, if different service providers like Spotify are going to make it hard for me to get it, I'm probably going to go to the source. And if the source is an independent artist, I'm probably going to get what I want. So
if it isn't, most users will find the free way.
There's a workaround. There's always a workaround. And again, it's not in the industry's sort of best interest to reinforce these boundaries, because people will find these workarounds and then they have to chase them down. I mean, we've seen it with, we don't have to get into Pirate Bay and Napster stuff, but we've seen this happen, and they hopefully have learned from that that sort of restriction in the past. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't make them money, and that's when we talk about the bottom line, they're not making these laws to be cruel and to limit our access to music. They're doing it because they want to make sure that everyone in the industry has their interests taken care of. That's what makes the industry thrive. So, money's part of it, and I think subscription services or, artist direct services are probably the way to go.
So if an artist, one of the things that I've always thought and had conversations with people is that maybe it's time to go back to the past where an artist released an album and then toured on that album, and that's where they made their money. They made their money on touring. And so my thought is, if artists say, you know what, I can tour, and that's where I'm going to make the money. People are going to come. I can sell T-shirts there. I can, it's X amount of dollars for a ticket. I can pack in a club or a stadium or whatever the case may be. Do the festival junket as well and make money that way. And my thought is that maybe the record labels don't want them to go that way, because then they're bypassing the record labels and saying, I'll release everything on my website and I'll just tour on the strength of my music and not on the strength of the marketing dollars that the record label is going to back it up. So my thought has always been that the record label is looking for a way to stay relevant.
Definitely.
And so things like SOPA down in the States, and up here, what is it, Bill 1133?
One of those, see something.
The numbers always change every year. Things like that are meant to, in my opinion, protect the record label rather than the artist, because the artist has or should have a variety of different options and opportunities.
I absolutely agree, and I think, again, that harkens back to the labels trying to maintain a system or a standard that really isn't as relevant anymore. You're right, the labels are not relevant. An artist, as we said, does not necessarily need them. What I think some labels do very well, though, is they offer that sort of full service, from merch to booking to even coaching and guidance, mentorship, like that kind of role I think labels are playing much more strongly in the artist's life. And it's funny, in a sense, artists had such a backlash against labels. You look at the past 10, 20 years, it's labels are evil and they're trying to, steal our money, and we've got plenty of examples to back that up. But, more recently we've seen these labels understand that maybe because their relevancy is fading, they have to step in and they have to find a way to become important again to these artists. The touring aspect, I think, is a big one, because part of what Supernova does very well is they help artists to book gigs. And booking a gig can be easy. It kind of depends on your connections, I'm not going to lie. But there's a lot of things that come into play. If you're a young band, if you have any members that are underage, it's very difficult. You can almost guarantee that if you can't bring a bar pole, that your band is going to have trouble getting booked in. Again, it's simply the logistics and kind of the finances of that bar and taking over the stage that night. So I think whether it's, a services agency like Supernova, there's a few other Side Stage, or some of the labels that are out there are stepping in and trying to help artists understand why they still are relevant.
Sure.
And it may not be the distribution anymore. Distribution might just be kind of one of those background services that they do once the band is in high demand. The upfront services may very well be making sure that band has gigs to play, make sure that maybe that their advertising is getting put out, or that they're somehow represented on different websites. There's a lot of, sort of soft marketing that goes into label management now. And I think that bands, there are bands who have someone in the band who's gung-ho and ready to step up and do that, but a lot of bands are trying to focus on the music, and, you typically don't see that skill set in the same person. You have someone who's very businessy, markety, trying to push the band and get them gigs, and then you have the kind of artists in the band who are more focused on making the music. If your band happens to have someone who's willing to play both roles, awesome. If not, you should probably defer to an expert. And labels are still a trusted route for many bands. Like, they're still something that bands seek out and would like to work with, but in the traditional sense of the past, where you kind of sign your life away, the label owns everything.
Yeah.
No way.
Not happening.
Yeah, I mean, even 360 deals now are kind of going down the tubes because promoters found it difficult to make sure that the profits were there. I mean, unless you're talking about Lady Gaga or U2 or somebody,
sure.
It's difficult to turn a profit using that kind of, multiple revenue stream model. So I think the band and the label would have to not just work together, but kind of be in agreement about how they're going to push that music.
True.
Yeah.
Are there, when it comes to whether it's independent bands or large bands, and I want to keep, the Lady Gaga example out,
Yeah.
I think she owns Twitter or something.
Yeah.
But are there any bands that you feel have used social media in a very innovative way, very interesting way, and a successful way?
I mean, I think there's a lot of common examples like Lady Gaga's and Justin Bieber's, but some of the local bands that have done very well, City and Colour, Dallas Green, doesn't have what you would consider an engaging social profile where, he's giving personal photos about what he's doing. He's kind of a guy who doesn't get too personal. But a lot of what is put out by his fans and retweeted is sort of picked up in a viral sense after he puts it out there. So that could be because he has a loyal following. It could be simply because it's almost like I almost want to say a lack of effort. If you make your social effort scarce and you're big enough, you tend to get picked up very quickly, and you become very popular. Arcade Fire is kind of a no-brainer, at least if you're from Toronto or anywhere around here. They've done a phenomenal job really using social software in a neat way. So they kind of jumped on the HTML5 train very quickly with the Wilderness Downtown website. And I think, they definitely have an agency who's running their social media. It's clearly not them personally. I have a feeling, again, they're not interested in the marketing aspect of music, but it's an engaging story that's being told about the band. So again, people are able to somehow relate to it, even if they know it's not really the artist talking. My favorite local band who has sort of come out of the woodwork in the past 2 to 3 years is actually the Arkells. And they tweet under, I believe it's Arkells Music. They have a great assortment of kind of personal things. You want to see the band's experiences if you're a fan, I guess, if you're interested enough to follow them on Twitter. So they share a lot of, personal photos. They'll share things like behind the stage photos. So right before they go on to their big gig, they'll have a photo that they actually tweet out. And I can imagine being in the crowd and seeing that go up and being like, oh my gosh, it's a connection. Yeah, and that's all it is. Like artists that do well in social media are the ones who know how to create those connections. And it doesn't not every artist is a good blogger or a good storyteller.
They're musicians first and foremost, right?
Precisely. So, I've seen some artists that are not, we work with a couple smaller artists. There's one in particular called Cure for Creativity. They work with Supernova. And they've just joined Twitter. They are really gung-ho, but you can tell they kind of don't have too much experience with it. They've only got 100 tweets so far or something. But every tweet that they put out is so enthusiastic about being part of the social platform, either reaching out to a fan because, they're so amazed that they messaged them, or even funny comments about what is this RT thing for retweeting?
Yeah.
The fact that they're kind of stumbling through the social experience gives a real sort of, I guess, validity to what they're saying. It seems very genuine. And I've noticed that, even fans who don't know their music, but they know other bands who they think they sound like, have started to pick up to retweet them and to share their stuff. Not because they know who they are, and not because they particularly are saying anything, valuable to anyone, but they think it's funny, they think it's cute, they think it's quirky, I guess is the word. So some bands, when they come online, they feel like they need to be a little too professional, I find. Like, I've worked with bands who want kind of a marketing plan for their social media, and I think once you get to a certain level, you might need that. But certainly when you're first starting, the reason that you're on social media is to connect. It's simply to find people who actually care about your music and to give them a way to feel like they're somehow personally connected to the artist behind it. And again, the bands that do that very well are the ones who just kind of wing it, I find. If you have a social media manager tweeting your concert dates, that drives traffic, but you don't see conversations around that kind of tweet. And I'm using tweets because they're easy, but Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I've seen a lot of bands use YouTube very well. YouTube's kind of a no-brainer for bands because they have live video, but a lot of bands don't seem to do anything with it. So they have a channel, but I don't see the channel being promoted or published.
And do you think that would be like a no-brainer because
the
visual and the music to be...
Well, and I guess from my point of view, a lot of work went into creating that content. Like, well, we all know filming stuff is not that easy. It takes a little bit of effort. So, from my point of view, bands tend to have a lot of content that they're maybe sitting on that they could very easily just put out there and start to either, engage with their current fan base or potentially attract a lot of new listeners just by putting it out there. And again, it could be simply photos that they've taken, but the videos are again, worth their weight in gold. That's why people are interested in the band. It's the music. But bands are picking up on Tumblr. They're certainly starting to use websites a little bit more. And, the DIY factor has pushed a lot of bands to actually try and figure this stuff out. I would say when I joined Supernova 3 years ago, there was a real resistance to bands having a Facebook page, having a Twitter. Twitter, absolutely. People did not care or value Twitter at all about 3 years ago in the music industry, at least from the band's perspective. Now I think through proof of concept, because they've seen some of the local bands pick it up and use it well, and just through accessibility, affordability, these bands are realizing that if they're going to pump up their messaging, if they're going to try to push their music onto people, social media is really the only way to do it. No one's going to buy print ads nowadays. You're not going to submit your video to Much Music and hope for the best. People take it directly to the streets, so to speak. And again, like a lot of bands are, if they don't know how to do it well, they're at least starting to embrace it. They're starting to see the value in it. And, same thing with corporate culture. Once we saw them start to apply and embrace social media, we see them actually start to value it as well. So, I'm hoping that with low-level musicians, that trend continues. And with the music industry, they keep, giving those low-level bands ways to sort of level the playing field through social media. And that's what Chorus and Supernova and others are trying to do.
Fantastic. This has been a great discussion. We're out of time now.
Oh, sorry.
No, thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
So we'll wrap it up, and you're moving on to a different phase of your professional career. I don't know if you want to talk very quickly about what's going on.
Yeah, very briefly. Social media is what I love. Engagement's what I do, and writing about anything is kind of like a big fixation for me. So my new job is going to be in the food industry. I'm going to be working with a lot of local restaurants, Toronto and Vancouver primarily, helping to really connect them to some of their customers, talk about new cuisine, new dishes, really talk about things that anyone who enjoys food would find engaging. So anyone should be able to dig what I'm going to write. But the whole point of me making that move is, again, to take these skills that are universally applicable in social media, engagement, connection, getting down to people on their level at the street level. Whether you're in music or food or really any industry, that's the new marketing world. And I'm really excited to go and try my hand at something new.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If people want to kind of check out what you're up to, where can they find you online?
Yeah. Well, definitely hit me up on Twitter, Corina, Corina. If you search Core Corina, you'll find me pretty much anywhere online. And check out Biff Bam Pop. South Park's coming back to Canada this week, so check out Biff Bam Pop.
Fantastic. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
coming. Thanks so much for watching. Again, my name is Kareem Kanji, host here at X Connect, as well as founder and partner co-founder and partner at Third Ocean. Thank you so much for watching. And again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/xconnecttv. And please go check out defineto.com and their fundraiser on April the 12th in support of the Remix Project. And we'll chat with you soon. Thank you for watching. Thank you.